Let's get to the games, Greg. We'll go right in order. Saturday, 4:30. It's Jacksonville at Kansas City. Always like to get your thoughts on any matchups or anything in particular in the game that really is of note to you or interesting.
Yeah, when I look at this game, one of the things that stood out, and obviously all these games, Ross, we don't have the time. You can talk about these games, each one for an hour. One of the things that stands out, these teams played Week 10, and all season long, the Jaguars have not been very good defensively on third down. They don't get teams off the field, and the Chiefs are really good on third down. And I think that's going to have to change in this game, because the Chiefs, they move the ball and they score touchdowns. We know how good they are in the red zone. So if they can't get the Chiefs offense off the field on third down, it's going to be a long day. So defensively, they're going to have to figure that out. And again, they have all week to do that. I don't know the answer. I'm not going to sit here and say I know exactly what they should be doing, but if they don't get that figured out, it's going to be tough.
What'd you see from Trevor Lawrence last week, Greg? It feels like, I can't remember many games where a quarterback looked that bad in one half and that good in another.
Yeah, I thought, look, I've actually thought 3 of the interceptions were really not on him in a strict sense. One of them, he just did not read the coverage at all. And it was one of the Samuel ones. Samuel obviously had 3. But, interceptions, I've always believed, and I said this numerous times to you, that you have to look at each one of those plays individually. You can't just say, oh, he threw 4 picks, that's bad. Obviously, it's bad just because you can't throw 4 picks. But, you have to look at each one. I thought a couple of things stood out in the second half of that game to me. Number one, I thought Doug Peterson stayed very patient with his play calling. They had a 14-play drive, and you would have thought 14-play drive, that takes 7 minutes. You can't do that when you're down 27-7. But that's the approach he took. He took quick game rhythm throws. He did not come out and try to hit explosive plays. They sort of stayed within who they are. And obviously, they hit the long one to Zay Jones, and that was a beautiful job by Lawrence pre-snap because he understood what the coverage was, and he changed. They were no huddle tempo, so he probably called the play at the line of scrimmage, and he did an unbelievable job on that specific play. But for the most part, the Chargers played a ton of zone, which makes sense because they're ahead big, and there were a lot of quick game throws that were really just pitch and catch throws, and it was more of Doug Peterson's approach that I found fascinating because he really took a patient, methodical approach as opposed to thinking, hey, we got to get back in this game right now.
That is interesting. What about Saturday night, Greg? It's the Eagles hosting the Giants. And, I got to ask a question. I think it's a fair question, Greg. Saturday night, Daniel Jones against the Vikings. How much of that was Daniel Jones playing really well, and how much of that was a Vikings defense that leaves a lot to be desired? Because it felt like, there were some open receivers.
I think you can always say it's both. The Vikings were in the playoffs, and their defense obviously has not been great this year in terms of stopping the pass. But I think the Giants have evolved over the last 5-6 weeks. This is a Daniel Jones offense now, not a Saquon Barkley offense. And I think that needs to be pointed out. Obviously they're going to give the ball to Barkley, but the offense does not run through Barkley. It's Daniel Jones. And by the way, this started, I'd say week 16 for sure when they played the Vikings the first time in the regular season. Dable had Daniel Jones drop back 49 times in that game. Now, you can sit here and say it's the nature of the opponent, and maybe it is. But I think Brian Dable's been around long enough to know that when you get to the playoffs, Ross, sure, you have to run the ball, no question. You can't be totally one-dimensional. But it's very hard to win without your quarterback being a factor in the games, a meaningful factor. And I think that he understands that Daniel Jones has to be a factor. Now, the big issue here is they need to be in close games. Because they're a play-action pass team. They don't really drive the ball down the field. It's a lot of rhythm throws, as you know. This is not the receiving core they expected to have out there when the season started. So they have to be in the game. in order to play the way they want to play, which leads me to think that how will the Eagles come out and play? It would not surprise me if the Eagles came out very aggressively, feeling like, hey, if we got up 21-6 in the second quarter, that the Giants can't play the way they really want to play. Then the Giants have to become a drop-back football team, and that's not the way the Giants want to play.
It's a good point. Really good point, Greg. We can move on to the Sunday games. Bengals, Bills. A lot of interesting things going on here. The Bengals have some O-line issues, but at least they know about it going into the game, can try to prepare for it. And the Bills, Greg, we saw it again on Sunday. As much as we all love Josh Allen, it just feels like the turnovers, for them to win the Super Bowl, they got to win 3 more games. Just feels like one of those 3 that he's going to have a multiple turnover game. And it's going to cost him.
Yeah, they're an interesting team because if you look at the Bills overall, they're really not it's funny that the Bills win a lot of games and have never been blown out since last year, early in the season against the Colts in Indianapolis. They all their losses are by 3-4 points, and they always score 30 points. They're the best third down offense in the NFL, and yet they have a below average offensive line. They really only have one receiver you can count on a weekly basis, and they have no run game. So it's pretty amazing that the Bills win a lot of games. So why do you think the Bills win a lot of games?
Josh Allen and their defense.
So this watching tape, I find this very, very confusing, Ross, as a tape guy, because there's no question that no coach wants turnovers. That's not, we're not going to debate turnovers. No coach says, let's get turnovers and see if we can compensate for that. But I'm also confused when I sit here and watch tape and watch the throws that Josh Allen makes that may end up seeming very routine when you watch the games on TV that are not routine at all. And that, no question, like the first turnover he threw, the long interception, that was on him. Obviously, the fumble at the start of the second half, that was on him. He was not responsible for the blitzer, but then you just have to get sacked and move on to the next play. It was first down. You can't try to make something special happen when you're 8 yards behind the line of scrimmage. But then he makes throws that many people won't even attempt, and he makes them. And like I said, they score 30 points every week pretty much. And they're the best third down offense in the league, and they're really not that talented on the offensive side of the ball. So you're right. If he throws 3 picks, one of these days that could haunt them. Trevor Lawrence threw 4 picks. No one's talking about that. So every game plays out differently.
Lastly, Greg, Niners and the Cowboys. Juicy one. Brings back memory of the 90s. Feels like I'm back in my missing 13 years old watching this game, or 12.
For those, 3-4 years, like from 92 to 95-ish, it seemed like they had great games every single year.
Yeah, it's like NFC Championship game every year. It was like the annual thing.
Yeah, this game's interesting. I mean, obviously the Niners are offensively a difficult team to play against. They play out of 21 personnel. The Cowboys will play big nickel. That's what they play. They don't play with 3 linebackers. They play big nickel with 3 safeties. That's their base defense. The 49ers have 5 players, include Juszczyk, who doesn't get the ball a lot, but they have 5 eligible receivers who can line up anywhere in the formation. Okay, so they are really multiple and diverse in how they can line up offensively at a 21 personnel. They can line up and just run the ball, or they can line up and with people in totally different places, and you have to figure that out on defense. And very often defenses, as go into default defenses. They go into a defense that they're very comfortable with because they don't want to do too much communication about, oh, that guy's there, what are we going to do now? They just line up in there, whatever that default defense may be. And that helps a quarterback before the snap of the ball. And that's been very, very important for Brock Purdy, is he gets a lot of clean looks defensively. And therefore he's able to really just drop back and know where he wants to go with the ball pre-snap. But they're a really difficult offense to play against. Obviously, the Cowboys offense played much better last week. I thought sort of late in the second quarter on that touchdown drive, that's where Dak Prescott really settled in. Up to that point, and going back the week prior against the Commanders, he'd been playing pretty fast, not seeing things clearly, but I thought he really settled in late in the second quarter, and then he looked far more comfortable. He looked more like the Dak Prescott that we were kind of used to seeing. So this is a really intriguing game. By the way, I didn't think the Niners defense had their best game last week.
Interesting. Tell me what you saw.
Yeah, the Seahawks came out very methodically, very patient. They wanted to run the ball. Obviously with Geno, they wanted short, quick passes. They wanted to stay in rhythm. And the run game was sustaining. They didn't necessarily get big runs, but they were able to kind of stay ahead of the sticks with the run game, which normally doesn't happen against the 49ers. So it'll be interesting how the Cowboys do this, how the Cowboys sort of balance their carries with Pollard and Zeke. Zeke is the tape tells you that Zeke at this point is not really that effective a runner, that Pollard really needs to be the guy. And we'll see now that there's only a few games left in the season, whether they feel like, hey, you can give Pollard 18, 20 carries, because now you just got to win the games.
Greg, two things. One is you called it last week. You said you didn't think Dak would have back-to-back bad games.
No.
And he didn't. And the other thing is, it's amazing that they can put Christian McCaffrey out at wide receiver, Deebo Samuel at running back.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys shouldn't even have position designations. They're just like weapons.
No, they split out Juszczyk too. They split out Kittle. Ayuk lines up anywhere in the formation. You have to. It puts the defense in a bind because, as you know, Ross, and I've sat in my office watching tape with defensive players through the years, and you can't coach defense, and this by saying, well, if they line up in this formation, do this. If they line up in this formation, do this. If they line up in this formation, do this. If they line up in this formation, do this. That's too much thinking for a defense. Guys can't play like that. You know that. You have rules, so you might have 2 or 3 formations that you're responding to, and after that, you just play your rules. I mean, that's the way it works. You play your rules and your techniques, and they just make it hard.
Check him out on social media at Greg Cosell, so you always know what Greg is up to and you don't miss any of his content. As always, you can check this show out on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. We post the best clips of Greg, not only on YouTube, but Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate it.